vaporizer to make sure that your temperature doesn't drop when you introduce that gas.
Thank you, Sam. And many fumigators out there will know with methyl bromide and some other fumigants that the vaporizers and heaters are quite commonly used in fumigation, so they may be new to some of you. Ashfaq has got a question they'd like to know about nitrogen gas requirement to use and what scale the Australian government will accept. So that might be about how do you size up from a smaller scale, Sam, perhaps to a larger scale?
Yeah, I might need some more information on that question. The only thing I can think of is, again, we require the use of liquid nitrogen or nitrogen extracted out of the atmosphere using a nitrogen generator. And the scale of the treatment is really up to the volume of the commodity and the treatment provider. But yeah, if I've misinterpreted that question, please put more detail in or send us an email and we can talk about that specifically.
Okay, thanks, Sam. So Ashfaq, if you'd like us to give some more detail on that question, we'll attempt to get that this afternoon as well. Ashay has got a good question here as well. He says, my supplier is into the business of organic food and they're not a treatment provider. They have a facility for carbon dioxide, but may not be interested in registering it as a treatment provider. So the question is, what does treatment provider registration mean?
Yep. So in the short term, as I said, all of these goods will require an import permit where they're using controlled atmosphere treatment. And as part of that import permit, we're going to want more information on the treatment provider and the type of facility that they're using. So that's first step. The other thing, as I've said, we encourage anyone that's looking to do these treatments, whether or not they're looking to do them like commercially and sell their service to other providers, or whether they're just looking to do treatments within one supply chain, then we'd encourage the treatment provider to register their interest with us. And that just means, all that means is an email to say we are interested in doing controlled atmosphere treatments, either for our own goods or to sell our service to other providers. So if you just send an email to say we are interested, any information that you have on your setup, photos are good. If you've got any procedures, those are also useful. But even if you don't have any of that information, even just to register and say this is our contact details, that will allow us to send you information, keep you alerted if we make changes to any of our requirements or our methodologies, and provide feedback to you on your treatment setup. So even if you're not looking to be a commercial public provider, even if you're only looking to do a treatment for one supply chain for your own goods, it's still important to register your interest with us so that we can provide that feedback to make sure your own treatments are effective. Thank you, Sam.
This question is a combination question, and it looks like an inspector has had some experience at a port where the treatments applied to vessels wasn't up to the mark, and they're asking for possible reasons why that could have occurred. So the question is, they work as an entomologist at a seaport quarantine, and they've inspected more than 15 vessels carrying soybeans, canola seeds or other grains. They've experienced that more than 80% of vessels were refumigated at the Karachi port, and then they were refumigated by methyl bromide or phosphine at the port of country of origin. The question therefore is, what would be the possible reasons that interception occurs frequently? Were the vessels perhaps not fumigated well? And that was despite having an airtight certificate treatment, the vessels were intercepted. So what could be the reason that's occurring?
Yeah, I think this is starting to get outside of the content of today's talk, so I'll keep this very brief. Live insect detections are pretty complicated to try and work out exactly, or can be complicated, sorry, to work out exactly what the failure point is. Sometimes it can be that the goods originally had live pests in them and an ineffective treatment was applied. That is one option. Another option is that the treatment was effective, managed the pests at the time the treatment was applied, but then there was some poor post-treatment hygiene and the consignment was reinfested following treatment. So it's a little bit complicated, and it sort of depends on the individual circumstance to work out exactly what's happening. So sometimes it can be ineffective treatments, sometimes it can be post-treatment infestation. Sometimes it can also be an effective treatment, but that the treatment wasn't targeting the particular pest. So you'll see these questions for methyl bromide. For Capra beetle, we require methyl bromide treatments to be conducted at 80 grams for 48 hours. If you're using a treatment rate that's below that, like 48 grams for 24 hours, which is a pretty common rate, that won't manage Capra beetle. So you can apply the treatment correctly, but the actual rate that you're using is ineffective on the pest that's within the enclosure. So it's a complicated sort of scenario, and each thing needs to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. But yeah, sometimes it can mean an ineffective treatment. Sometimes it means that the treatment was wrong, or the wrong rate or the wrong type of treatment was used to manage a pest. And sometimes it can be post-treatment reinfestation. That doesn't have a lot to do with our phase 3 measures, so I might try and bring it back to that and just say, for people that are concerned about that specific example happening to their goods, it's why it's important to make sure that you're using a treatment provider that's effective, and it's why we're encouraging treatment providers to register their interest with us, why we will design a scheme where we'll have approved treatment providers, so that can give people some confidence that the treatments are being done effectively. There's also a responsibility on the rest of the supply chain for a couple of things. Firstly, to make sure that the treatment provider has the time and resources available to them to actually conduct the treatment properly. So for these controlled atmosphere treatments, like we said, some of them can take up to 28 days just in the exposure period. So making sure treatment providers have enough time to conduct the effective treatment, and that there's not pressure put on the treatment provider to make that exposure period shorter, because it'll mean that the treatment won't work and you won't manage the pest. The other thing the rest of the supply chain can do is to really pay close attention to that post-treatment hygiene of the goods, to make sure that they're not coming into contact with goods that haven't been treated. So not being mixed with untreated goods, not being loaded next to goods that haven't been treated, not allowed to sit around for a long time exposed and just waiting for reinfestation. So that's a few things that people can do to manage the risk to their goods here.
Thanks, Sam. Question from Banzi Gerunda, and asking, is there a particular instrument that they can use to monitor carbon dioxide concentration? I know we spoke again about, we don't mention particular brands, but are there areas that you can suggest that Banzi can look?
Fortunately, CO2 concentration devices are relatively common because they're used a lot of the time as part of safety equipment. So there's a lot of really good high quality devices out there. Those that listened yesterday will have heard my standard answer to this sort of question, where this will very much depend on what's available in your country and what your own uses for it are. Things to consider are the cost of the device, how often the device needs to be serviced, the reliability, so how often it breaks down, and how easy they are to use. So position them in the correct place and then get accurate readings off them, how easy all of that information is. For these treatments, you'll know that we require the treatments to be conducted every hour throughout the treatment. So you may want a device that's capable of taking readings automatically and storing the readings. So those are the sort of things that I'd consider. I'd encourage everyone to just do their own research. The department isn't in the position of recommending one particular device, but if you do find a device that you're interested in or considering purchasing, I'd encourage you to contact us, and we can provide advice as to whether or not the device is suitable and will meet our requirements.
Thank you, Sam. Question here from pn@organicfumigation.com, controlled atmosphere again. And is there requirements of sampling interval of temperature and gas concentration in controlled atmosphere? For the heat, it is shown around 60 seconds. And I do remember you did put some frequency of measurements of sampling for temperature and gas for controlled atmosphere.
Yeah, so for both of these, it's every hour. So gas and temperature readings need to be monitored every hour from the point that the gas is introduced right until the end of the exposure period. And like I said before, for a high carbon dioxide treatment, that can go for, well, it's a 28-day exposure period, and it can take 2 or 3 days to introduce the gas. That's a month worth of readings recorded every hour. So like I said before, you'll want to look at devices that, you know, a battery powered device probably isn't going to last that long. You'll want it connected to main power and probably taking the readings automatically and recording them. But yeah, so the actual requirement is once an hour.
Thanks, Sam. And I've got a follow-up question from Ashay. Now, they asked before about a treatment provider registration and what does it mean. They had an organic supplier, and their question is, hi, Sam, if my understanding is correct from your explanation earlier, if the product is in exclusionist, for example, organic wheat flours, which will be exempted from atmospheric controlled treatment, but we need to get phytosanitary certificate for container. So that's just clarification, I think, between maybe treatment certificates, is it, and a phytosanitary certificate?
So we spent a fair bit of time yesterday talking about the difference between these measures for the goods and the measures for the containers that were introduced in April this year. And it might be just worth touching on that again. So if you are carrying high risk plant products from a CAPRA target risk country in an FCL container, then that container needs to be treated. It needs to be treated with methyl bromide, heat, or insecticide deltamethrin. If you've got high risk plant products from a CAPRA risk country, the goods also need to be treated. So the container will need to be treated if the container's FCL. The goods will need to be treated regardless, right? The goods require a phytosanitary certificate. The container just requires a treatment certificate. If your goods are on the exclusion list, so they're not a high risk plant product, then the entire consignment is excluded from the requirements. So if you're not on the list, so if you've got an exclusion, then you don't need to have the container or the goods treated. This particular comment talks about wheat flour. So one of our exclusions is for flours, powders, and that sort of thing that are packaged in bags less than 25 kilos. Those are excluded from the list of the higher risk plant products, but those goods still require a phytosanitary certificate. So the goods don't require treatment, the container doesn't require a treatment, but the goods will still require a phytosanitary certificate to say that the goods have been inspected and that they're free from pests, free from live Trogoderma. So yeah, hopefully that's clear. I'd encourage you to have a look at the high risk plant products list on our website and the exclusion, and it sort of talks about that scenario a little bit. But again, if you've got any questions, feel free to email us your specific example and we can provide more information.
Thanks, Sam. Another question from Anonymous. Does the department, are they able to give some training in the controlled atmosphere area like they have been doing for methyl bromide? And that just gives treatment providers a bit more information, a bit more detail they might be chasing. So any chance we can roll out that training for the controlled atmosphere work we're talking about?
So in the short term, we don't have any training exactly like the methyl bromide stuff, but I will say that a lot of the concepts between methyl bromide and controlled atmospheres are similar. You're both dealing with gas to try and get an effective treatment. So the requirements or the principles are similar between the two. which means that the training that we've got available and the guidance material, so I know a few people are going to be familiar with our guide to performing methyl bromide fumigations. A lot of the principles there are going to be applicable to controlled atmosphere treatments. Where they differ, it's where our requirements are different, and our requirements, I'm confident at least that our requirements are clearly articulated in that controlled atmosphere methodology. And again, at the moment, they're out for consultation. So if people have questions or don't think that those requirements are clear, please let us know and we can amend that before we publish our final version. So in the short term, I'd encourage you to look at the methyl bromide training and guidance material, because a lot of that will be applicable to the controlled atmospheres. Longer term, we will be looking to provide more information as we identify specific issues. Again, as I've encouraged the whole time, if you are looking at conducting these controlled atmosphere treatments, get in contact with us, send us an email, and we can, talk to you specifically, talk to you about requirements, and almost provide like ad hoc training and advice to people. So I just encourage you to talk to us if you're planning on doing these treatments.
Thanks, Sam. So that email address is up in the chat. That's the offshore treatments at awe.gov.au email. A question from PN Organic Fumigation again. Is controlled atmosphere under TARP for bulk goods, can that be classified as one of those valid controlled atmosphere treatments? And just they're highlighting that the process supports continuous monitoring and controlled gas concentration and temperature measurements.
Yep, so that would be a valid option. It would be considered a sheeted enclosure, so it just needs to meet all of our requirements for sheeted enclosures for controlled atmosphere treatments. So that means 6-side tarping, so all around and on both ends, and you need to pressure test the enclosure before you apply the gas to it. But yes, otherwise you can do that treatment. Thanks,
Sam. Alessandro has a question again related to tarping, I think. Good afternoon. Is tent treatment allowed for bulk-free commodities? So is that like a 6-sided treatment? Could that be determined a 6-sided treatment?
Yeah, that's pretty much the same question as the last one. Yeah, so long as it's 6-sided, 6-sided tarped, so fully enclosed in a tarp, so long as you pressure test, so long as you monitor the gas concentration and the temperature and everything, then yes, those treatments can be conducted.
Thank you, Sam. And a question from Anonymous again. When is the control atmosphere technology officially allowed? And second question is, do you have any suggestions for controlled atmosphere service providers? So how do we get that information to them? And that date again was, I think, 30 September, wasn't it, Sam?
Yep, so you're exactly right, 30 September. And so any goods exported after 30 September will require treatment with one of our options. One of our options is, of course, these controlled atmosphere treatments. But that means you can start conducting those treatments now, if you like, noting that we've got our consultation draft of our methodology. So if you follow the requirements in your consultation draft, that'll be okay for now. In terms of suggestions for controlled atmosphere treatment providers, at this stage, no, we don't have a list of approved options. That's why we're looking for treatment providers to register their interest with us.
Thanks, Sam. And it looks like we've got some treatment providers here putting up some contact details. So it's Anonymous. Hello, everyone. We're an Eco2 company. We have provided controlled atmosphere solutions since 2000, exactly what this session has been talking about. Our clients are spreading across the world, so they mention 10 countries across Europe, Asia, Africa, etc. They offer diversified solutions to meet their clients' demands. They're based in the Netherlands and Vietnam, and there's an email contact there, in fact, 2 email contacts, and just saying that they can assist their clients interpret these Australian controlled atmosphere conditions. And I guess maybe that's a discussion, Sam, you can assist with too.
Yeah, I think Eco2 might need to pay you for that little promo there, Jamie.
Narendra, Go Plan. Is it necessary to fumigate the empty container using methyl bromide? I think this is a question you've answered before. They talk about the floor of the container is made of wood, and they talk about the treatment there for, looks like the ISPM 15 treatment, 48 grams. Maybe you should clarify that about the container and the commodities again, Sam.
Yeah, so again, we spent a fair bit of time yesterday talking about this, but so our requirements are that for high-risk plant products from Capra Beetle target risk countries, both the container and the goods require treatment. Now, if you use methyl bromide, the container and the goods can be treated at the same time, so long as the goods are suitable for treatment at the time that happens. If you're going to use any of our other treatment options, you need to conduct the treatment separately. So if you want to use controlled atmosphere treatment for the goods, the container still requires treatment, and it's still going to require either methyl bromide, heat, or insecticide treatment. If you are using methyl bromide, you need to use our Capra rate, which is 80 grams per cubic metre for 48 hours at 21 degrees, which is different to the ISPM 15 standard. If you treat the container once, either as part of treating the goods or treating it separately, you don't need to treat the container a second or a third time. It just needs to be treated once within 21 days of export. So that 21-day rule is easy to remember. It's the same for everything. So the goods and the container must be treated within 21 days of export. So if that treatment's done separately, both the treatments will need to be conducted within 21 days. But if you're going to use methyl bromide on the container, make sure you're using our Capra rate, 80 grams.
Good clarification, Sam. Loan's got a related question regarding the 21-day rule, and they're saying the treatment has to be done 21 days prior to export date. They want a clarification. Is that counted from treatment started or treatment finished? The completion of the treatment, yeah. Ashay's coming back and just says thanks for clarifying earlier question. And if they're bringing FCLs as mixed product and the majority of product is processed or an exclusion list from the controlled atmosphere treatment, will the entire consignment be exempted from going through the controlled atmosphere treatment, or will they have to do the treatment for the portion of the goods that are required to be done?
So if you've got an FCL and one of the goods in that container is subject to our Capra Beetle measures, then the container is subject to the Capra Beetle measures. So the container will require treatment. So if you're loading a container and part of the goods are subject to the measures and part of them aren't, and you treat the goods that are subject to our measures with controlled atmosphere, you will need to conduct the container treatment separately while the container is empty. So you fumigate the container with methyl bromide, you treat the goods that require treatment with controlled atmosphere, you can then put the container together. With the goods that aren't subject to our measures, no further treatment required. So long as the container gets treated and so long as the goods that require treatment are treated, that's all we need. When you put everything together, we don't need another treatment to happen then, if that makes sense.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, it does. That's good. Another question from Anonymous, and it's a very species or arthropod species specific question. Will controlled atmosphere be considered as an acceptable BMSB treatment if it's also acceptable for Capra Beetle? It's a very specific question. I know that we do these things in what appears to be a fashion that excludes one insect base from another, but just reinforcing how different Capra is. Will it ever be transferred, do you think, to BMSB?
Look, at this stage, I'm not aware at least of any research that's even been done on controlled atmospheres for brown marmorated stink bug. That doesn't mean there hasn't been, I'm just not aware of it. If anyone can show the efficacy data to demonstrate that controlled atmospheres are effective against BMSB, then yeah, definitely it would be a treatment that we'd consider along that pathway as well. I just want to reiterate for everyone that all of Australia's biosecurity measures, whether they're treatment or whether they're any other control that we put in place, are all based around the science that we have for the particular pest. So if people are finding science for measures that are effective that Australia doesn't have, please send them through to us, and we're more than happy to consider them.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Steve, also for replying to that question. I can see you're doing something there as well. Adil Ashadham, Pentagon Fumigation Services in Pakistan, is saying if they're doing a direct fumigation in a container loaded with goods, they're asking that question again, Sam, about the container fumigation. Do they have to fumigate an empty container first?
Yeah, so again, the container, so if you've got high risk plant products, and Pakistan is a capra beetle target risk country, so if you've got high risk plant products and the container is FCL, then the container will need to be treated. The goods also require treatment. If you use methyl bromide, those treatments can be conducted at the same time. So you can do one treatment that manages the goods and the container. If you choose to do that, then the goods need to be suitable at that time when the treatment is conducted. So they can't be in plastic packaging. So you can imagine if you've got rice that is, in supermarket ready packaging, by the time it goes into the container, it is not suitable for fumigation at that time. So that is when you wouldn't be able to do the treatment at the same time. But if you've got rice in bulk bags that are made out of material that allows methyl bromide to go into the bags, then you can treat the goods and the container at the same time. If you choose to use any other treatment for either the container or the goods, so not methyl bromide, then you need to do the treatment separately. And for any other treatment option, the treatment on the container must be conducted while the container is empty. So if you heat treat the goods and then you choose to heat treat the container must be done empty prior to loading. If you treat the container with insecticide, it must be treated prior to loading. So hopefully that clarifies. Yeah, if you use methyl bromide, you don't need to do it prior to loading. You can wait until the container's loaded. But if you're going to do that to also manage the risk of the goods, then you need to make sure the goods are suitable for fumigation.
Thank you, Sam. And there's more information on that in that phase 6A on the Urgent Actions website as well. So thank you for that question. Another question from Pentagon Fumigation Services, this time from Mohammed Shoaib, and saying, can you clarify the fumigation on unsheeted and sheeted containers, please? Just make that difference between the six-sided sheeted and the closed containers.
So for methyl bromide fumigation, the treatment of the container, where you're treating the container, you need to do it as a sheeted enclosure. Both doors need to be open. It needs to be done under sheet, and you need to put a fourth monitoring line underneath the container for if you're using methyl bromide to manage the risk of capra in the container. If you are conducting a controlled atmosphere treatment and you're treating the goods while they are in the container, then the container does not count as being treated. But that doesn't mean you can still use the container as an enclosure if you choose. In that instance, you're just using it as an enclosure. You can do it either sheeted or unsheeted, so long as you can get the controlled atmosphere concentration maintained in that enclosure throughout the entire exposure period. So if you're using methyl bromide, sheeted container, both doors open, extra monitoring line under the floor. If you're using controlled atmosphere, sheeted, unsheeted, doesn't make a difference, but it doesn't count as the container being treated.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks for clarifying that. Question from Peter at Eco Worldwide Solutions. Does the once an hour gas concentration monitoring, does that also apply for the vacuumized packagings? I think we talked about vacuumized packagings before.
Yeah, so again, at this stage, the department hasn't looked at vacuum packaging or applying a modified atmosphere as part of the packaging for the goods. So again, if you're talking about the goods, you know, the retail packaging that the goods go into and applying a vacuum or modified atmosphere as part of that, then that's not acceptable for our requirements. If you're talking about it as part of like using a sheeted enclosure and vacuum testing that as part of your pressure test and then doing the treatment, then you do need to monitor. But then, of course, it wouldn't be vacuum once you put in your gas. So I'm going to assume that you're talking about the packaging for the commodities, and in that case, the department at this stage is not recognising that as a valid option.
Thank you, Sam. And a question from Anonymous. Could we do heat treatment for empty container and a controlled atmosphere treatment for commodities in combination for treatment for shipment?
Yep, absolutely. That would be one way to meet our requirements. Excellent.
Good. Well, that's the last question I can see come up from Anonymous. So at this stage, what we might do is just start to wrap up, knowing we've got 3 minutes to go, and we'll get to those last 3 questions if we need to. We'll publish those on the website. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you very much to our speakers today. So we heard first from Nathan Reid, and Nathan spoke about the CAPRA urgent actions. We then heard from Charlotte Gardner, and she spoke about the high risk plant products and phase 3 requirements. And then we heard from Sam on the phase 3 controlled atmosphere treatments. We had a very active Q&A. There's 38 questions there that have been published and just a few more to go. What I will quickly do though, before I start to wrap up, is I might give my colleagues a chance if they'd like to say anything else before we do that. So whether Nathan would like to say something, or whether Sam or Charlotte would like to say something. No, I think they're probably okay. That's good, just checking in. Part of our lovely clunkiness working from home and in separate places. Thank you very much to the audience too for joining us today. It's been terrific to have your company. We certainly value your time. We value your questions. And as Sam and Charlotte and Nathan pointed out before, it gets us right into that zone where you are. You have to deliver these treatments, these controlled atmosphere treatments. And we just want to make sure we give you enough information in order to do that, to meet the requirements, those import requirements. So you've heard us talk about BICON, the import requirements website. You've heard us talk about the methodology for controlled atmosphere, and you certainly heard the detail that Compliance Partnership team have put into providing that methodology to you. It's out for draft consultation until the 12th of September, I think it was, Sam. Yep, so that's out for comment. So please go to that Urgent Actions website, go down to phase 3, I guess, and have a look at where that controlled atmosphere draft consultation document is. Anything we can do to make it more achievable for you, as long as we maintain that control of Capra beetle. That's our number one priority, is to keep it out of Australia. And again, it's why we put all this effort into both the regulation of this particular pathway, but also the effort into demonstrating how we can, or we'd like you to achieve these treatments. So from here in Australia, from Canberra for this afternoon, there's nothing else there from my colleagues, I don't think. I've got one more chat box to check. And now that's all from all of us here. Thank you so much. You have a great afternoon or evening or morning, depending what part of the day you're in. We do value that time, and we'll see you again next time soon. There'll be more information sessions coming up just to help going through those different phases. We'll get answers to those questions on the website, Urgent Actions website, and we'll do our very best to get that out as soon as we can. So thank you all. Have a good day, and goodbye from us all here in Canberra. Bye-bye.